discussing whether we want to spend money on eelgrass, either in the amount of $10,000 if the vote on that amendment failed, or $9,000 if the vote on that amendment passed. That make sense? Okay. So, fortunately, our town bylaws allow only very few other motions to be made while one is on the floor. One is to amend. Another, great favorite, if you spend any time at town meeting, you will come to love this one. Call the question is a motion to stop debate. Now, sometimes people try and do that real early in a discussion, and I will usually cut them off because I won't allow that motion. But there comes a time where everybody starts to get, okay, we've heard the pros, we've heard the cons, and but my attitude is you vote by voting. You don't have to go to the microphone to tell everybody how you're going to vote. If you have something to add to the discussion, great. But there comes a point where the discussion is getting repetitive. And so someone will usually come to the microphone and say, Mr. Moderator, I call the question. So that is a motion to call the question. The meeting then drops the discussion that we were in about eelgrass, and we would then move to, we would immediately take a vote on whether to stop debate. And I would explain to people, we have a motion before us and second to call the question. If you vote yes, that means you've heard all the discussion that you want on this topic and would like to proceed to a vote. If you vote no, that means that you want to hear more discussion. Usually, by the time we've gotten to the point where somebody wanted to call a question, everybody's in favor of it, and so we take a vote. A motion to call the question has to pass by a 2/3 majority, though. But again, usually it does if we've really finished discussion. Sometimes we haven't finished discussion. The motion to call the question fails, and then we go right back to discussing planting eelgrass. But assuming that motion passes, discussion is now ended. You can also make a motion to adjourn, which means, you know, if it gets to be 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, we're clearly not going to finish that night. We adjourn to the next night. So, time to vote. Either discussion is ended, and I see no one else standing at a microphone, so I know we're finished talking, or there's been a motion to call the question, and so we voted to stop debate, then it's time to vote. First thing I will do is say, all those in favor of the motion, and kind of repeat the motion so everybody knows what we're talking about, although it's always up on the screen too. I'll say, please say aye. And I listen to the people say aye. And then I say, those opposed, please say no. And then we'll hear the no's. If it's obvious from that, I declare the vote, either passed or failed. That's one of my jobs. One of my important jobs is to declare which side won in every vote. I have to say who won. And so I'll say the motion is carried. Sometimes it's carried unanimously. You know, no one votes no. I'll say that's carried, or the motion is defeated. Sometimes the ayes and the noes are too close to call. So we say, would all those in favor please raise their hand? And then I look at the hands, and then I say those opposed, and they raise their hands. If it's obvious from that, I call it. If not, we move on to the next one, which is to count the vote. This is another one of those that everyone groans inside quietly to themselves when it comes to this, because then that means that I have to call up some volunteers that I've gathered before the meeting, who we divide the hall into groups, and then they go through and we ask people to raise their hand and keep their hand up until they get a clear signal from the teller that their vote's been counted. And the tellers go along and they point and they point and they point and they point, so people know when they got the point in the eye contact that they can lower their hand. And they have little counters, and then when that's finished, they bring those totals up, I add them up, and then we declare which side won. On rare occasions, we will have a paper ballot, extremely rare occasions. And in fact, our bylaws really don't even allow that to happen, because a motion to have a paper ballot is not one of the motions that's allowable once we have a main motion on the floor. You know, we get back to, it all starts with that main motion. And then there are other motions that we can do, like to amend, to call the question, to adjourn. A motion to have a paper ballot is not one of the allowable ones. However, there have been situations where I really thought it would serve the meeting to at least have the option of a paper ballot. So I've had people speak to me ahead of time, and what I've done is, before we, you know, say if we wanted a paper ballot on our eelgrass motion here, the harbor master would come to me ahead of time and say, people feel really strongly about the eelgrass. I think we need to have a paper ballot here. So what I would do is, before he makes this motion, I would recognize him to say, I move we decide Article 25 or whatever this article was by paper ballot. Then the meeting discusses that. If we agree we want a paper ballot on Article 25, then we take the motion on Article 25 and move on to that. I'm listening to myself and I'm thinking I'm getting a little too detailed here. So I declare who won the vote. If you think I got it wrong, this is state law. If 7 voters stand up and say, I doubt the vote, because they think I called it wrong, that I called, that I miscounted hands, then I by law have to do a hand count like that. That's never happened because if I think it's even remotely close, I just move on to, if the voice vote is remotely close, we go to hands. If the hands are remotely close, I go to counted. Now, so what we just ran through there is how we deal with a warrant article. It starts with a motion, it's seconded, we get the Finance Committee recommendation, we discuss it, we vote. We move on to the next article. A couple of exceptions to that. The consent calendar is a group of articles that among the things that town meeting has to do, town meeting has to rubber stamp things that nobody disagrees on. We all know that we need to do them, and yet they have to be separate warrant articles. So one thing that we do to speed things along is we take a large group of those articles and we lump them all together. So I ask for a motion to vote a large group of articles together in accordance with the recommendations of the Finance Committee. This usually passes unanimously because they're all non-controversial, and again, it moves the meeting along. So we get a lot of them out at the same time. This next one is important because this applies to the budget, and this will really come into play when we talk about how you guys can get involved. There are lots of times where we have an article that says, let's spend this amount of money for this, that amount of money for that, that amount of money for that, that amount of money for that, and that amount of money for that. So in other words, there are multiple line items all in one article. The town budget has 80 line items, something like that. I've never counted them, but something in that order. So lots and lots and lots of line items. So we deal with that a little bit different way. We certainly don't want to start a wide open discussion on every line item in the budget all at the same time.